Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this month's webinar. We're really excited to share some great information with you tonight, and we know this is a popular topic amongst our math teachers. We're going to hold off for just a couple minutes to let folks get settled in and let our couple-minute latecomers join us. Please take a few minutes right now, though, to download the handouts. We will be engaging with those as we progress tonight. And while we're waiting, we're going to put up a little poll that we would love for you to participate in. So we'll get started in just a couple minutes. All right, so we're going to go ahead and share the results of this poll and get started on tonight's webinar. I'm going to ask one of my colleagues who, I don't see the poll on my screen, so I'm going to ask one of my colleagues who sees it to tell us what the results are.
So it seems that most of our attendees have joined us on a couple of webinars thus far. We have some people who've been to about 4 to 7, but most of us are newcomers, so welcome, and I hope you enjoy what we have to share.
Awesome. Well, thank you, and thank you everyone for joining us for the webinar tonight. Like I said, we're really excited to have all of you join us, and we're excited to share some great content with you. I'd like to start by introducing the group of us that has put this webinar together and are here to host you tonight. My name is Joni Funderburk. I'm the Manager of Professional Learning on the Field Impact team, and I'm joined tonight by my director, Sandra Alberti, as well as Janelle San, Jenny Beltramini, and Linda Nguyen from my team. We also have a special guest from the math team at Student Achievement Partners, Astrid Fossum, and then a Connecticut core advocate, one of the teachers out in the field, Sarah Baranopoulos, is here to talk with us tonight as well. For those of you that are newbies on tonight's webinar, you might not be familiar with the Core Advocates program. If you are interested in learning more about who Core Advocates are and how you can get connected, please feel free to contact Jenny or me directly. We also have a couple of links here to informational surveys that we can have you complete to get connected to our database. One of the benefits of being in our database is you will get announcements and information on a regular basis about webinars such as tonight. So we would really love to have you join our network. We are active on social media, and we hope you are too. We encourage you to tweet tonight during the webinar. Please use hashtag Core Advocates so we can all share one another's learning. And follow us student achievement partners at Achieve the Core on Twitter. We also have some of our the presenter Twitter handles on here, so feel free to tag us on your tweets as you engage with the webinar and share your learning tonight. We're going to ask you to be interactive with us. One of our goals with these webinars is to be sure that you're an active participant and not just sitting and listening to us talk for the whole hour. So we will have you access documents. If you haven't already, please note on your control panel, there's a place where it says handouts, and there should be 5 of them affiliated with tonight's content. Encourage you to download those. We also will be asking you to engage with us via questions. You'll do that with the questions tab, and you'll just submit those questions to us. We'll answer them and share many of those answers or questions with the whole group. And we'll also ask you to complete some polls, which some of you have already done with our first poll this morning. So those polls will just pop up on the screen for you to engage with. Directly following the webinar, we'll send you a survey, and we really do deeply appreciate your feedback. We try to use that feedback to get better from month to month, so please take a few moments to share your feedback with us after it's over. And then within a day or so, you'll receive access to the recorded webinar, including the slide deck and all of the handouts that we're using tonight, so you have those for your future reference. We anchor all of the work that we talk about as through core advocates in this idea of instructional advocacy. So I just want to name what we mean by that. Instructional advocacy is educators owning, supporting, and promoting the resources, tools, and practices that create learning environments in which students develop college and career readiness. This is definitely a focus of tonight's webinar. We would love to hear what you do as a result of the learning that happens for you tonight. So we have this brief survey that we ask you to fill out called the Instructional Advocacy Action Form, and that just takes a few minutes to complete. The link is there at the bottom, and you'll also have clickable access to that when you receive the recording. So we have 3 main goals for tonight, and these goals will break our webinar into 3 parts. The first thing we're going to do is talk about why it is crucial that all students work with and learn grade level math content. And then we'll move into talking about specific strategies that support students who struggle in accessing grade level math, and then some additional specific resources. And if you've downloaded the handouts, you might see already a little preview of some of the information that you're going to learn tonight. So I'm going to kick us off by talking about why it's important for all students to have access to grade level content. And I want to just cite a couple of citations from some professional organizations. The first comes from NCTM. This is from their position paper, Closing the Opportunity Gap. And this is also one of your handouts if you're interested in reading the full paper. But let me give you just a minute here to read this quote. We wanted to share this quote with you tonight because I think it's obvious that when students aren't successful in math, it's often a function of their lack of access to grade level content. And we know that all of you are interested in solving this problem. That's why you're joining us on the webinar tonight, taking the responsibility that we all hold as educators to work against these gaps in opportunity. So again, I would encourage you to read the rest of this position paper that NCTM has published, and on the NCTM website there are several other position papers that align to this topic of the importance of all students having access. The second quote I want to share with you comes from the National Math Advisory Panel and their final report from 2009. I'm again pause and let you read the quote on the slide. So again, I think the quote here gives us a frame for understanding the implications around not getting students to college and career readiness. This report predates the Common Core standards and other college and career ready standards, and was one of the influencing factors in writing the standards that actually drove the structure that helps us actually realize this goal. So I know it's a little bit of preaching to the choir, but we do want to anchor all of our conversation tonight in the research telling us that this is absolutely crucial for all students to access grade level content. I want to talk too briefly about one of the struggles that we all experience as classroom teachers is this idea of needing to meet students where they are. That it definitely is a requirement to think about where students are at when we're working towards supporting them, but we want to be sure that we're not staying where they are. So I want to show you just quickly some student work. This is a first grade task, an addition of 3 integers, and you'll see this sample student work from a first grader. This student isn't accessing these problems through grade level content because we don't see the student making sense of 10. What we see is the student drawing a representation for each of the 3 digits in each of these sums and then actually counting them up by one. You can see, like in problem number 6, the little dots in the circles, the student actually has to count number by number by number. And that's a kindergarten level approach to this problem. So if we say we're going to meet the student where they're at, we're going to meet them at the kindergarten level and try to work them up to accessing the first grade content. But we want to be sure that our work with that student doesn't stay in the kindergarten level for the entire year. We want to try and get them to that grade level content. And I think this next slide makes that point clear, why that's important to do. This image is a little fuzzy, but this is a paper representation of the coherence within the standard. So each of the little nodes in this diagram represents a standard, and we can see arrows making connections between the standards. Math, by its very nature, is cumulative, and ideas build upon one another. So when we look at this yellow dotted standards in 2nd grade, if a student has struggles with that standard or doesn't have opportunity to access the math content of that standard, all of the red dots are related or dependent on the knowledge from that 2nd grade standard. So we can see how the student's ability to succeed snowballs as they progress through the grade levels. So again, we want to be sure we're meeting them where they're at, but not keeping them where they are, because that snowball effect from grade to grade just holds huge implications for our students. And we know that all of us care about our students and their success, so we want to be sure we're doing everything we can to support them in accessing grade level content. So before we move into the next section, we'd like to just pause and give you an opportunity to share your perspective on what prevents teachers from using grade level materials and instruction with all students, and what hesitations you might have about this practice. And I wasn't supposed to read that slide, but my colleague Sandra is going to share some of your responses with the whole group.
Great. So just to remind everyone, you're going to use the question tab in the right-hand control panel to answer this question, and I'll be monitoring and sharing some of your responses. Okay, you guys keep on bringing in the great answers, and so we had some of the typical responses like fear, not enough time, students aren't ready. Some people noting, sometimes teachers have low expectations. They're afraid that students will become easily lost. Some people identify teachers' lack of content knowledge as a barrier. Really a great point about teacher misunderstanding of the meaning of differentiation, meaning, are we working toward the same goals or differentiation leading to different goals? And just so you all know, you can't see everybody's responses, but as the webinar progresses, I'll be sharing out some of the responses in the question box so that hopefully you'll get a chance to take a look at them as the webinar progresses. So thanks everybody for contributing some really great responses.
Thank you, Sandra. So we're going to move forward now into the next portion of the webinar. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Astrid Fossum, to talk to us about some specific strategies for supporting all learners.
Great, thanks, Joni. So here we have a slide that is really highlighting the NCTM publication Principles to Action. And within this publication, the authors are really challenging us to take action as teachers, coaches, math specialists, interventionists, all of us working in the math field. And it sets forth some guiding principles and teaching practices that are informed by research. One of the 6 guiding principles is outlined here on this slide, the access and equity principle, and can provide grounding for meeting the needs of all learners. I'm going to give you a minute to just quickly read that, the guiding principle for access and equity. So within this principle, it's really critical to remember that all students should have access to high quality teaching and learning, not just some students. And this is also really the promise of the standards. One thing that I want to put out there right now is that access and equity and the work we're going to talk about right now is difficult work. It's hard and it's challenging. And that's because it's something that goes beyond just caring. Now we're really thinking about knowledge, we're thinking about strategies, content knowledge comes into play, and the action is how are we going to get to the how? How are we really going to do this work? There's nationwide effort around opportunities, cultural relevance, equity and access, and more of a focus is being placed in this critical area. I really do believe that we're going to get some good results based on some really collaborative good thinking, and from that we'll get some good improved outcomes and some really tangible action steps to help us. Additionally, Principles to Action not only outlines the 6 guiding principles, but 8 teaching principles as well. 2 of the 8 teaching practices are shown here. I'm going to also give you another minute to read these 2 teaching practices, one on task implementation and another on using evidence of student thinking. So when we think about the students who struggle and come into our classrooms with gaps and unfinished learning from prior year's content, we can look to these principles for guidance. If you're not familiar with this publication, it is available through NCTM, and there are specific strategies and action steps that can be utilized and are shared in the text. Thinking again about allowing students access to tasks that promote thinking and allow for varying entry points offers opportunity. Utilizing student evidence to make informed decisions can ensure that students' needs are really met. The catch here is that teachers cannot pull student evidence from problems that don't elicit good information. So task selection is crucial. We're going to take a look at a task right now and review it and ponder this one here. It is a 7th grade task. I'll give you a minute to read through this. And now let's look at the evidence that the student has provided. So this time the evidence is in written form. Of course, we're not in the classroom right now. But as the teacher, I'm asking myself, like, what's really going on here? I see that the student has procedural understanding. They're able to do the calculation, and they were able to decode the application situation in the context of the problem. What I'm kind of struggling with as a teacher is there a piece of conceptual understanding that might be missing? The student didn't complete the prompt or the task, there is a missing equation. So I have to ask myself, would the student need intervention, small group intervention, or is this something that I can check for during whole group instruction? So given this information, and right now just from one task, I know that there are decisions that I have to make. Do I have enough information from other sources, right? Do I have other student work to help me make some informed decisions? Is there diagnostic data that can help me determine the needs of the students? Or is there another kind of instructional step I could make? Maybe it's following up with the students by asking for further clarifications or questioning techniques. Maybe it's written descriptive feedback that I'm providing to the students, and I'm allowing them an opportunity to revise. I think the thing that is interesting here is that now it's like there are a lot of possibilities to consider, right? Sometimes that can be a challenge, but I think when we get to this point and we see that there are so many things to consider, we have to be optimistic about that and celebrate the fact that this student evidence is providing me as the teacher with these multiple paths so that I can consider instructional decisions and I can consider different ways for meeting the student's needs. Other tasks just simply wouldn't illuminate these considerations. They wouldn't give me an opportunity to really think long and hard about how to support the student in my classroom. And I can only make those decisions if there is a task that displays the kind of information to help me make informed decisions. So where do I go when I have given tasks, I have student evidence, but I need a little bit more guidance? One tool that can support work in the area of struggling learners is, and as you think about tracing back to prerequisite knowledge, is the coherence map. This resource really allows you to dig back into a standard, and there are additional resources provided within. When you select a standard in the coherence map, whether it's one you're currently working on and teaching, whether it's one you're planning for, or one where you have observed some students struggling or grappling with misunderstandings, the coherence map can be your best friend. Say I'm clicking into grade 6. I have an example here on the slide of 60EA2, so I'm in expressions and equations. And that standard is going to be my home standard. I have a path that will appear kind of showing me how the standards connected to 60EA2 really connect. These connections could be with other standards in the grade, which you're going to see kind of to your right on your screen. That's allowing me to build like coherence within the grade, probably during universal instruction time. Or maybe there are going to be connections that are illuminated that are outside of the grade level, perhaps from prior grade levels. And that's going to help me determine how I can strengthen unfinished learning within whole or most likely small group instruction time. So we're going to ask a poll question now. Which is, which features of the coherence map have you used to support struggling learners? And there should be some answer choices that you can check as many as apply.
Yeah, sorry, Astrid, I was on mute. I read the question, but I was on mute. So unlike before where we asked you to put your answers in the question tab, here we want you to click right on your screen regarding the coherence map itself and how you have used it. And even if you haven't yet had the chance to use it, you can indicate that as well, and we'll see how the numbers pan out here. So I'll give you a few seconds to do that. Somebody's dogs are being very naughty. Okay, Linda, if you want to share the results of the poll. I'll try to speak over my dog here. And so exciting, I think that about half of you haven't yet used the coherence map, and so hopefully you'll get some motivation and excitement to do that, and quite a few of you using it for kind of like the most common use, which is backwards mapping of prerequisite standards. But we're really excited about some of the features that have been added to the coherence map, and so I encourage you all to take a look at that within each of these standards, there is language from the original progressions documents that were put out by the University of Arizona. We have specific lessons attached to standards, and even the ever so sought after specific assessment items that map to specific standards. So hopefully that gives you also some motivation to take another look, even if you've already started using it.
Thanks. One of the things we're going to be doing is looking a little bit more at the coherence map for mapping out prerequisite standards, and I think that hopefully this process in the next few slides will help illuminate that in maybe multiple different ways that you haven't even considered before. So we talked about task selection, and we talked a little bit or have introduced some ideas around the coherence map. And I have student work and I'm using the coherence map, but I really need, as a classroom teacher, to like think about where to begin, right? All those multiple paths that were mentioned before. What's on the current slide is a flow chart that's meant to show a possible process. Now, this is under development and co-created with Chrissy Allison, who's the director at ANET and her team. And we're kind of seeing this as a content way to think about RTI and a multi-tiered system of support. Really, the particular questions in this flowchart are meant to bring out the standards, the skills, and the actions that a teacher can take when thinking about and really focusing in on how to provide access to grade level content for all students. So this process on grade level math is a possible strategy, and it will help, you know, educators make more informed decisions about what really to do. Thinking about studying the standards and the curriculum really pretty deeply. What information am I getting when I've diagnosed students' current knowledge, skills, and understanding? Where are the gaps? How many students is this really affecting? And then how can I kind of move forward? I have this gap that I have to bridge. What are some possible action steps that I could take? And I think that's where it gets overwhelming, because there are so many action steps we can take. But this chart is meant to kind of help us think about not just focusing on the content that needs intervention. This is also one of your handouts. So if you want to look at that throughout the next few slides, that will be helpful too. I'm going to kind of put myself in a scenario right now, which is that I'm a third grade teacher. And I've been focusing and really pondering how I'm going to work with my students around their grade level fluency. So we have standard 3OA C7, which is around multiplication and division within 100 in third grade. I've got my other OA standards here. I'm thinking within this domain, what impact does this standard have for learning in this domain? How am I going to get there? I can go into the coherence map and put that standard in. And if I think about that flow chart from before, I'm actually kind of thinking about the left-hand side of it, or action steps for whole class support. Let's say the majority of the students, either I know this is coming up, or I've noticed that maybe the majority of the class is still struggling to become fluent. I'm going to start with the standard. I've put the standard in the coherence map, and the map is going to help me see some of those connections shown on the slide here. There's strong connection to the work in grade 3. There's also some connection to work in grades 4, 5, and 6 that's popping up when I put that one in. Good to know that I can't just ignore this standard, right? Like, this is a major work of 3rd grade. And within that, I could click in any of these boxes and get kind of lost in the world of the coherence map to see like additional resources, lessons, tasks, or assessment items that would help me supplement instruction. But this information right now is really helping me plan. It's helping me plan the remainder of the year. It's helping me plan and support fluency within universal instruction for all students within my whole group time. And maybe it's helping me plan and figure out where I'm going to fit it in and where these connections help in upcoming units and modules. So perhaps I've done that. And now I'm kind of thinking about the next slide where I might be addressing the students on the right-hand side of that former flow chart that was up. There's still a small number of students in my classroom that are struggling with the 3 OAC 7 standard. Fluency, it's not kicking in for them. I'm really struggling as their instructor, like, what's going on here? The more I dig into the map, the more I think, and maybe there's other student work that's helping, to illuminate this for me, either evidence from other tasks or diagnostic information. But I think that there's something going on with 3 OAA1. I've pinpointed that the students are struggling to make sense of really the meaning of multiplication. And voila, like, what happens here? There are connections that come up, possible unfinished learning from grade 2 or grade 1. Now, this coherence map gives me this path, and if I tap on any of these, I would see lessons, activities, things that I can pull in to support small group and student learning. But I will give a caution here, not to go back too far. And the further we get up in the grades, the more red tape I'm going to put around that, and that, an 8th grade teacher, and me as a former middle school teacher, it's hard to know how far to go back. And there may be times where we need to pause, ask students, gather a little bit more evidence before all of a sudden just taking the grade level that's the farthest behind. We really need to think carefully about what the students need and what's imperative for the learning at the grade level, so that we don't forget that how important that grade level content is too. We've outlined some of these common missteps, again, working with ANET and Chrissy and her team there around, what we've seen as possible missteps. And we're coming up with some possible recommendations for that, or things that we've seen that are successful. I think of this chart as kind of being strategic as being a strategy. As you look at this and you see that there are revisions or additions, please reach out at any time. Let us know. This is still in development. But the things in the missteps, I would say, are often current strategies that we've seen that just aren't working. So let's try recommendations on the right-hand side that might be more successful. This might be moving from addressing every gap to prioritizing around major work. This might be going back too far, which I've cautioned about a little bit too. Okay, going back just enough. The trick here is, of course, what is just enough. You know, I think about myself. I've been out of the classroom for 10 years, but it's like, oh, I've done that, and now we know, and we're learning. You know, I stopped instruction. Oh, we have to stop and go back and provide this just-in-time support within each unit. Again, not getting to the point where I'm spending enough time on grade level material. We, in my former district, used to joke about getting louder, closer, and doing the same strategies over and over again, but we really want to think about providing new experiences. So think about that common missteps chart as a helpful kind of being strategic as a strategy to really help with just maybe if you're just simply frustrated with what's not working, and think about some of those recommendations along with the use of the coherence map and that strategic task selection that can help you transition from one side to the other.
Okay, so we have another question to share with all of you. And so this is kind of connecting all of these issues, which is to ask you, how does using the standards themselves to create a strategic approach to intervention set teachers and students up for success? So again, use the question tab to type in your answers, and I will work hard to share those with you. So many good answers. I'll just select a few for now. It is to the joy of those of us that work in the math that I think probably the most common word that was used in the many responses that you all submitted is focus, so that by using the standards, we can focus our time on the interventions that matter the most for students. Several people responded about it gives us direction, it helps give a plan, it helps us to understand how to fill in learning. I love the comments that were about it not only helps support the students, but it also helps build teacher knowledge of the work as well. And somewhat related to that is that it's important to know where the students are coming from and where the students are going. And so, Ashrid, before you go on, I wonder if you might address one of the questions that I saw when I was monitoring this talk before, which was you made a comment earlier about like go back to previous grade levels, but not too far back. And so a couple of people asked, you know, if you could help qualify that a little bit. Why not too far back, and how far is too far?
Yeah, I think that's something that we're struggling with a little bit. Ideally, like you think about this gap as being like, how foundational is this knowledge? Sometimes we have to go pretty far back, right? Because we can see, like, even in the example that Joni showed earlier, like that progression of, you know, 7 years of content building, we may have to go pretty far back. Other times, and this is very specific, which is why I'm having a hard time with answering, it may just be a year or two before, because I don't like to use the word quick fix, but it's not kind of as essential or imperative to upcoming content or grade level content. In a sense, or in a way, it's kind of like we have to prioritize. And I think that the focus documents help us do that. So that may be a good place to kind of start and figure out like how far back do we reach. Hopefully that kind of helps. Like,
Thanks, Asha.
Awesome. All right, thank you, and thank all of you for your questions as well. So let's move into the third part of our webinar tonight and talk about some additional specific resources that you can use to support all learners. And right now, I'm with great pleasure going to introduce our core advocate guest tonight. Sarah Baranowskis is with us. And Sarah, why don't you take a minute to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do before you share your resource suggestion. I think Sarah might still be muted.
I'm so sorry about that. Hi, everybody. I am currently the K-5 mathematics curriculum leader at Suffield Public Schools. And prior to that, I was also a K-5 math specialist and interventionist. So a lot of the things that we're talking about tonight were definite problems within the practice that I was encountering. As of right now, it still remains a huge problem with supporting students not only through the curriculum and assessment within my role, but also how to support those struggling kiddos within the curriculum. So if we take a look at the quote that is on this page, well, it's taken from the Structure is in the Standards document, and it discusses how maintaining mathematics learning is within our instruction is important for helping all students learn mathematics at a high level. So I'll give you a second to read through that. So the standards were written to be similar to a growth chart in a doctor's office. So they provide a reference point for our kiddos, but no child really follows that chart exactly. So within our classrooms, having kiddos with gaps is a real possibility. As teachers, we need to think about how to move forward from seeing our kiddos' gaps as needing to be fixed, and rather to see them as how we can connect current grade level content and experiences to connect for content for prior learning. Maintaining that math learning progression within instruction is important for helping all students learn mathematics at that higher level. So this page shows the areas of demands and difficulties, and you can find these within the Math Accessibility Strategies handout. It was adapted and developed by the EDC, the Educational Development Center. And they did research in the area of struggling learners, specifically special education students in math, and identified these 6 accessibility issues as having the greatest impact on the learning of mathematics. By paying attention to these students with disabilities when planning our mathematics instruction and thinking about how to support their specific learning needs, we will be able to better address the needs of all the learners within our classrooms. 2 of the demands and difficulties that I see most frequently within my current role and in my past roles is how to support students who struggle with conceptual processing and or visual spatial processing. Just a little background on conceptual processing. That just involves making connections among mathematical ideas, facts, and skills, and then reflecting upon and refining our own understanding. Once students enter middle school, these students begin to work with abstract concepts that make greater use of symbolic representations. So students who tend to think concretely, they might need additional support in order to move from concrete to abstract, and actually vice versa. We all have those kiddos who think procedurally right off the bat, and then when we ask them to explain their thinking, they really struggle with that. So my example for this is, as teachers, we all give our students word problems, and we have these kids who, when you give them that word problem, they look it over for 2 seconds, and then they push it away, and they're like, I don't get it, I don't get it. And in this case, you know, many times your students are trying to go right to computing the answer only by looking at the numbers and relying on the keywords to try to get that procedure and get the answer. So what I wanted to share with you is a little exercise I've been doing with my teachers, but I'm sharing it with you because it's something that you can do with your students to really help with this conceptual processing. So what I've been doing is offering word problems without the question. So for an example, I would say Joni has 5 apples, Sandra has 3 more than Joni. And what I'm asking the teachers to do is, how can you show the context concretely? So with manipulatives, how can you show that? After the teachers are conceptualizing that, they then create that pictorial representation of that thinking they just specifically did. As a team, we then share our representations, or I'll choose the most, the ones that kind of lead along with the purpose of the learning I want them to do. And then I have them evaluate each other's representations for questions or clarity, so they can ask clarifying questions. And then they make connections between the representations. So for example, they may make observations that all of the representations are using base 10 block models, but how the numbers within the context are decomposed are all different. And then lastly, once those representations are shared, the teachers then go back and connect their original thinking to the actual procedural pathway for solving the problem. Engaging teachers in this work has really helped them to begin to understand how important conceptual processing is for all students. So when you go through and do this type of activity with your kids, they'll focus more on making sense of the problem and figuring out how to go about even attacking it and then solving it concretely, and then connecting that through the representations, whether pictorial or the abstract equation. So as far as the visual processing, we know that representing mathematical ideas is the key to understanding mathematics. Some difficulties with tasks are caused by a breakdown in the processing of that visual information. So I'm asking you to think back to that first grade sample of the student at the beginning of the webinar who was drawing all of those circles as individual objects and then counting all. So if we think of the 5 plus 5 plus 6, that the 5 circles were represented in 2 groups that were side by side. So thinking about how to move that student's learning forward is, what if we gave him a 10 frame and asked him to use that 10 frame to be building 5 plus 5 plus 6? He'd then be able to see the 10ness that are inherent within that, connecting his visual model to that equation of 5 plus 5 equals 10, and then maybe adding the 6 more. And then he can begin to understand and make sense of unitizing. So that visual processing using a tool such as a 10 frame can then lead him from drawing all of the circles and counting all to more efficient strategies of counting on and then composing 10 stacks, which are those end of the year first grade expectations. So I'd like to hand the webinar back over to Astrid for some additional resources.
Great. So we often get questions about specific strategies for our English language learners, and we recently found this new resource, the Framework for Re-envisioning Mathematics Instruction for English Language Learners, that was just published in December from the Council of the Great City Schools. And they share here some concrete strategies for classroom use. It is one of the handouts as well, and tonight's webinar will be sent out. But to begin really thinking about tasks and assignments for our English language learners, and really all math learners, how those should be high-level cognitive demand, mathematically rigorous on grade level, and make explicit connections between new and prior concepts. Thinking about some of these strategies here, teachers should ensure that students have the opportunity to engage in productive struggle, allowing them time to make sense of the task or problem solving before intervening. And we're often quick to help, and that's in our nature. But we need to really think about that, giving that time for productive struggle. English language learners also should be in a classroom environment that makes ample use of multiple modes of communication: speaking, listening, reading, writing, all kinds of multiple representations, pictures, diagrams, visual displays, and really thinking about those bridging techniques for multiple communication settings. So whether working with a peer, making presentations, critiquing the reasoning of others, working in small groups, those allow for students to express their mathematical reasoning, really describe their solutions to problems, and thinking about like their how they're developing their understanding of math concepts. Classroom instruction should facilitate academic discussion, allowing and strengthening the move from conversational to academic language. And finally, when necessary, really thinking about how teachers should strategically employ scaffolding techniques, targeting to meet individual students' needs, promoting, rigorous math content there. But each of these ideas of instructional practice is considered in detail in its own section in the document, and there are specific bullets and techniques. The next resource, which is an article by Jennifer Bay Williams, coming out of the Teaching Children Mathematics, shares these techniques of context and content strategies, as well as additional activities in an appendix. But when working through tasks, it's really important for investigations or stories with students in class to really ask yourself the questions: is the context culturally relevant? Is the context familiar to my students, or is this context new to them? Is this a context that I can reuse so that maybe if it is new now, it will become familiar over time? And whether I've decided yes or no to these context questions, then I need to determine what kind of context support is needed. Maybe it's showing examples, maybe it's vocabulary preview or review, and then go into considering content questions. Is the math vocabulary familiar or new? Does this vocabulary have multiple meanings? And the table here shows some language considerations on the left and some examples on the right. Words that have a different use in everyday language table, not the kitchen table. That can be very confusing. Related but language, but that isn't as specific the way we use it in everyday language. So similar, has a very defined mathematical definition versus the way I would use it in kind of everyday conversational talk. Homonyms can also be very confusing. Some and some, or rows and rows, like not the flower rows. So it's important to examine this vocabulary carefully within a class. Also thinking about students' native language and possible different meanings. So there's an example for that as well. Finally, on Achieve the Core, I have a few quick resources to share with you here that can support you and your school, your district, as you think through how to provide appropriate resources for all students and for all teachers. One is the assessment evaluation tool, or you may hear us refer to it as the AET, which is a rubric that you can use to evaluate your current assessment system, or if your district is purchasing something, to use perhaps as a universal screener. It would be a great tool to use because you want to remember that you want an assessment that gives you accurate diagnostic information, but you want that information to be on the content that matters most. And this tool has specific indicators to help with that, as well as to help with considerations for struggling learners as well. The instructional materials evaluation tool is another rubric that would help you analyze kind of reviewer and existing materials for classrooms. On the slide, we have a screenshot of where to find some of the SAP mini assessments. So if you're looking for some good mini assessments or additional problems or tasks, these could be pulled into smaller whole group. Some of these are linked in the coherence map as well, but you could check these out on the Classroom Resources tab, and those resources are in Word documents, so you can kind of modify those to meet the range of learners that are in your room. Finally, for additional resources, if you're looking for something that has some kind of concrete steps, or you need a little bit of research to share with others, we have some documents linked here from the Institute of Educational Sciences, the National Center for Educational Evaluation. They put out practice guides, and they're very informative and have step-by-step suggestions and recommendations for implementing specific strategies, some content-specific here, to fraction instruction, and then also problem solving for grades 4-8. The Council of Great City Schools also, along with the English language learner document that we shared earlier on the specific slide, has another resource around multi-tiered systems of support. So those are, we wanted to be able to share some of those resources with you tonight as well.
I just want to chime in and say all those resources are hot linked, so when you receive the recording for the webinar, you'll be able to just click right on them to go to those documents.
I think maybe we should skip the question, Joni, in interest of time. I mean, I see some people already responding, so that's great. So we have about 4 minutes left. And let's just say you can either share some good resources, and I'll try to share those out by the end, or if you have additional questions for either Sarah or Astrid or Joni, we can talk about those also. Give people about 45 seconds, let's say. I see a lot of people putting Zern.org, some learn Zillion, illustrative mathematics has been listed, and somebody even shared that illustrative mathematics has a new middle school curriculum that has baked-in supports, and so I know that is fresh off the presses, so hopefully you guys all have a chance to take a look at that. Reflex Math for Fluency, 10marks.com, Eureka Math, Unbound Ed. So lots of good resources and so much content. We're close to the end of time, so I want to give Joni the appropriate amount of time to wrap us up here.
Great, thank you. So as I mentioned earlier in the webinar, we definitely want to hear about your experiences as you take action on what you learned tonight. So I know with all of this great content and the huge number of you that are logged on to our webinar tonight, we're going to see lots of things that you're doing. We'll be anxious to hear about what that is, and you'll get a reminder email from me in a few weeks to check in with us and let us know what you're doing. So we encourage you to do that.
Can I just say, Joni, that the URL missing the hyphens, so it's educators-taking-action, and so we'll correct it when you get the hyperlink version, but in case you can't wait the day to tell us what you're doing, we'll make sure that you have that correct URL.
Sorry about that, thank you. Okay, and then just a quick plug, many of you, well, hopefully many of you are attending NCTM. We at Student Achievement Partners are sending a group of folks to present at NCTM, and we would love to hear if you're going to be there. We have a quick survey for you to fill out. We would love to promote your session, and we would love to do some informal gatherings, so please let us know if you're going to be at NCTM. And finally, I just want to wrap up by letting everybody know we have a great webinar on tap for next month as well. On the first Wednesday of April, we'll be talking about building fluent readers, and our special guest will be David Lieben, and he is always a wealth of knowledge and entertainment on our webinar. So the registration link is now open, and we would encourage all of you to attend that and share that with your literacy colleagues. So on behalf of the entire team and our guests tonight at SAP, I want to thank all of you for your time and attention, and we hope you learned a lot, and we hope you have a fantastic night. Bye-bye.